Okay, so let's imagine for a second that you give students an assignment to write an essay, and they submit their essays. You spend a ton of time grading them, and you hand them back. What happens with that information? What happens with that data? That data is so useful both to you and it's useful to the students. So, what I want to talk about is creating an individual learner profile. And the idea here is you would capture that data and you'd record it in a meaningful way for both you and for students. So, students can see how they're progressing, and students can make goals for themselves. And you can see how your lessons are having an effect on students, and you can make plans for individual students. So the way I put this together is I've used Google Sheets, and it's a really cool way to set up an individual learner profile. And it's a really easy way to do it. And it seems a little complicated because you have to copy and paste some different functions, and you have to learn a little bit about what they mean. But once you do, you can understand how powerful it is, and you can understand how simple it is. So I'm going to go through how I put together my individual learner profiles. So this would be an individual learner profile for a student. I put together one for Hermione Granger, and this says argument growth, and then it shows the four areas of our rubric. So our rubric is here. It's the Illinois State Board of Education's literacy standards. And what I did is I just took the argument writing standards from high school down to middle school, and that became our rubric. So you got our introduction, our development, our transitions, our conclusion. We use that, and the student can open up their learner profile, and they can see how they've been doing along that rubric in all of their tasks. So here you'll see their first task was a little lower, and it increased over time. And that's really cool for me to see, because as a student, it's cool for me to see because I can see, oh, hey, I did learn something in this class, and I can reflect on that. But also it's really cool because they can set goals for themselves. And then it's cool for me as a teacher because I can pull this data up to make important instructional decisions. But also I can say, hey, yeah, I did make a difference. Here's how my lessons did work. And I can look for trends, and I can individualize my lessons and my feedback for students. So how do I put this together? How do I make this work? You need to start with just 2 Google Sheets. Okay, so you're going to make 2 sheets. You need one where you're going to put data in, and you need one that's going to be your template for how data is going to come out for an individual student. So here's my data going in template. It's really basic, but my actual one is huge. It keeps going and going and going. But what it just says is here's my rubric categories, my intro, development, transitions, language, and conclusion. And then here's the numbers. Here's how they scored. And you'll notice I blanked out the names here, but I just have some for Hermione Granger. So the Hermione Granger ones are here, and they say informational, and they say how she did. Now, what I want to do from there is I want to say, okay, I've got my data input sheet set up. It's pretty simple. I want to create that data output sheet for an individual student. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new sheet, and I made this tab called data import, but you can name it whatever you want, but I call it data import because it just grabs the data where it says Hermione Granger. So it doesn't grab any other student's information. It doesn't grab anything that shouldn't go to Hermione. It just grabs the data points that belong to Hermione Granger. So I called it data import. The function here is pretty simple. It seems complicated. It might seem complicated, but it just says query, which means, search some data. It says import range. It's got an address of my input sheet, and it's got the name of the tab in my input sheet, and then it just says all of the cells in my input sheet. And then that's the data import. That's where it's pulling all the information. But then it says select just these certain columns where just this certain column says Hermione Granger. So where it says just that name. So you can just copy and paste that. You can change the address. You can change the name. You can change what you want it to grab, and you can change what you want the query to be. You can change what you want what the names are going to be. So that address is really important. Where do you get that address? You're going to find that on your sheet. Every sheet has an address that goes from D/ to /edit. You just grab that, copy and paste it, you throw it into this function, and suddenly it's pulling from that function. Then you have to make sure you have the name of the sheet. So this data here is just the name of the tab that you see down here. So we see, okay, so the name of the tab is data. So the name of the tab is data. Over here in my function, the name of the tab is data. It's perfect. So now this is Hermione Granger's data. Everything about Hermione Granger goes into here. So then what I want to do is I want to say, okay, how am I going to organize that data to make sense to students? So what I've done is I've made a different tab for each domain that I assess. So I've got argument, I've got information. On the argument one, you'll see it's just pulling the scores for argument. So how did I do that? I wrote another function that is over here. It's actually two functions. I have one for the date because I wanted to have the averages in the middle. But it says query, which means search all that data. Here I just have data import ! And then all of the cells there. And I said select A where D is argument. So select just A in data import where D is argument. So you'll notice this function, for whatever reason, going between two tabs, the function is very different. So you just copy this one to go between different tabs. And then I have this one that says select E, F, G, I, where D is argument. So take those argument scores, is what it's saying. Here it's saying take the dates where it says argument. Here it's saying take the scores where it says argument. Once you have that here, you can decide how am I going to organize that data in a way, in a graph or in a chart. So I've got all this information organized in a way that I think looks good to students, and it's organized in a way that makes sense to me. But you can set up your chart or your graph in any way you want. So once you have that set up, and that's your template for your individual learner profile. So you have this template set up, and it's perfect. It's exactly what you want, and you make sure of that. But that's just one student. So you're thinking, okay, how do I expand this so that it can be for all of my students? And the way to do that is actually much more simple than you think. So what I do here is I go to my file, and I put this in this Google file. So feel free to steal any of these things. And so let's say, I've got Hermione Granger, but I want to make another student. All I have to do from here is I copy it. I make a copy. And let's say my next one is going to be for John Smith. I rename it for John Smith. And then I open it up, and it's still processing everything for Hermione Granger. But all I have to do is change the name on that data import code. So I'll go over to my data import, and I'll take a look at that function, and I'll just change Hermione Granger to Smith John. And suddenly everything will change for John Smith. And so what I do is I would make my template, I'd make it super perfect for the semester. I would make my folder on Google Drive, and I would just sit there for a little bit. I would copy this, and I'd change the name. And suddenly, each time I have a different individual learner profile for a different student. When I'm all done with that, I just hit share, go through and I hit share on it, and I share it with the student. So then it's in the student's drive, it's in my drive, and they can go back and look at it, and I can go back and look at it. And so I highly encourage you to check out the shared folder and to steal these documents and to set up your own individual learner profile. And if you have any questions, you can email me. If you have any If you come up with your own cool ideas for assessing your own classes, your own something specific to your school, please email me and share with me. We can talk about it. I'm it's very empowering. I'm super excited about the idea that you can see that you are making a difference in your teaching. And I'm super excited about the idea that students can see that they're making a difference in their learning and our class is worthwhile. And lastly, I think it really values each student's individual journey, because not every student is at the same level, and every student has their own goals that they have to set for themselves, and it really differentiates your instruction. It differentiates your feedback. I think that's a really cool feature of this. So again, steal anything in here, do some cool copy and pasting, and let me know how it turned out.